And I keep doing this. All right, so women just are out of their norm. If you were in your norm, you would be in nursing, teaching, now medicine, actually. But in the engineering field, right there you stick out, not in your norm. And now that I realize most people were born overseas, I was born in the U.S. My parents were born in China, but I was born in the U.S. And back then, like I was raised in Bethesda, Maryland, Potomac, Maryland, and from the Washington, D.C. area. These are pretty big places. And we were like the only minority. And we were the only Chinese, although the only minority in a lot of our neighborhoods. I went to Catholic school. We were the only minority in the whole school. And then I went to Potomac, Winston Churchill in Potomac, Maryland. My class of 600. There were probably only 3 minorities. And I mean, everyone else was Caucasian, European. Okay, and of course, probably many generations in the U.S. So I actually, my family, my siblings and I, my family of 6, we've always stuck out. And then in that time, since there weren't that many people overseas coming over, very few Chinese, very few, having women in science, interested in science, or good in science, good in math and so was very rare. And since we were Catholic, I went to Catholic school in 9th grade, 1 year, and because of my math, I ended up in a class by myself. Because whatever reason, they didn't have, I don't know, I ended up in a class by myself. And then they pulled me out because there was enough science and math in the Catholic school. They put me in the public school. And then because of whatever, I ended up taking 2 math classes with a class by myself and also the normal class. So it was just, you know, so just to let you know, so Asian, right, it might be more common. Going to engineering, which is, you know, for my background, it was definitely uncommon. You know, most of my friends were, you know, doing cheer. In fact, I was a cheerleader 1 year because they talked me into it. And, you know, they were into, you know, the makeup, the whatever, and so, of course, I wasn't interested in any of that stuff. So I was stuck out. So then I went to, so my point is, like, even though you now, I mean, I don't think you appreciate how much of a community you actually have compared to when I was around. You're not, so you're actually in better shape than I think when I was going through stuff. And because you're in an industry that doesn't have that many women, and some things are out of the norm. Now, you're working with a bunch of men who are actually in their comfort zone. A lot of men go to engineering. So now there's a group, your background is, you're gone into a technology or in a field where you're out of your element, working with a bunch of guys who are in their element, all right? So in some sense, by just even making that, you know, picking this degree or whatever, you should be comfortable with being in your, being around, you know, all men who don't understand you or whatever, because, I mean, you're out of your element. You already made that decision. I'm just to enforce that this is who you are, and you should actually embrace it. That you're going to stick out and you're going to have these biases no matter what because it's life. One of the, which this is a version of slide, but the second bullet I was going to say, I've always was on the bleeding edge type of thing. Probably because I stuck out all the time, you know, I got on the bleeding edge. Well, let me go through a little bit of my background even more. So one of the things I got into is piano. You know, typical Chinese, you know, we do, you know, music. And so I ended up doing a lot of competitions and stuff like that. And I ended up going one year, so this is Washington, D.C. area, and I ended up doing a competition. There's all these levels, you know, I don't remember anymore, 3 levels. You know, keep for 1 round, keep for another round, and then there's the final, so there's just 2 of us. And the goal, I don't know what the goal was on the competition, but basically there was 2 of us left. And I ended up competing, and I love Beethoven, so with my small hands, it's actually difficult, but and I love Beethoven, and I knew after listening to the woman, girl, kid, that I actually was better than her. And when the judge, you know, did the judge, she won and I didn't. I was like totally floored. So the judge comes up to me. She She goes, you know, you were the better player. Okay, she goes, in fact, you were very good. Okay, but she said, I put you number 2 because I couldn't see your face. And I looked at my teacher, and she goes, you know, this is some of the problems that happen in competition, you're, you know, in it. I was so pissed, I said, the hell with this judgment thing. It's so biased. And so, in some sense, that helped shape me that as I went through different things in life, my career, not that I'm arrogant and so that I'm always right, but when I got criticism or biases of, you know, just perception where I am, and I know myself well enough to know it's wrong, it doesn't bother me, okay? I don't, you know, fight, I don't argue, I mean, well, sometimes but it doesn't bother me. And I'm very introspective of, like, you know, I know my weaknesses. So when there's comments, you know, there's usually never, like, you know, totally wrong. It might be too much, you know, wrong one way, but there's always some truth. And in the end, when you're judged, it's always a perception. There's some perception you're giving, right or wrong. And so I become more conscientious about perception, and how it impacts people. And in the end, their perception versus mine. And if you're trying to work with a group that has a perception, then there is something you're doing that's causing that perception. Whether it's valid or not, it's just that's the way it is. So I usually then try to step back, try to get beyond the feelings of, you know, pissed off. And think about maybe some of the comments and then try to get some factual pieces and then go from there. But just so you know, I was shaped through my years of judgment, recognizing, you know, you're not judged based on technical a lot of times, it's a perception. But because I think I was constantly sticking out for one reason or another, that's why I got more comfortable doing bleeding edge stuff. I didn't worry about failing because people were always judging me anyhow, so what the heck. But let me keep going. So then, and so I'm American-born Chinese, and back then there were very, very few American-born Chinese. So then I went to Purdue for college, and again, you know, I think out of the thousands of people, there are like maybe 3 American-born Chinese women. So I went to computer science. My whole family has gone into engineering. In fact, my younger sister went to MIT. Everyone went to EE, because that was the field, and computer science was the fluffy stuff. Well, me being very independent, I said, well, I'm not going to do what everyone else is doing. I'm going to go to computer science, whatever this thing is. And back then, it was very nascent. And this is when hardware was software. So I think it's hilarious about my siblings who are engineers and now software people. So I laugh. And then they transition to it and have their issues. They're like, yeah, this is what software was. Always like that. So it's interesting. So fine. So then I'm going to Purdue, and I ended up meeting my, ended up with my husband. I've been married over 30. I've been in AT&T for 37, 38 years. I've been married 37, 38 years. And because I'm American-born and there really weren't that many Chinese, I ended up dating him, and he's Caucasian. In fact, he's doing Spanish, Italian, Puerto Rican kind of thing, so I guess but we ended up dating, and back then, I mean, talk about interracial marriage, I'm really sticking out. You really stick out. So just continue, you know, I just keep, you know, constantly sticking out. So being in the, you know, computer science field, I would take physics, and so forth. I was interested in, like, the perception biases that happened there. So I was acing physics. Because I already knew, you know, physics is hard if you don't know calculus, but I already had calculus in high school, and so I tested out if I didn't take calculus, and then physics, once you know calculus, the first person, right? And at Purdue, you have like three different versions of physics. You can take it in 3 years, 2 years, or 1 semester. I mean, not 3 years. 3 semesters, 2 semesters in 1. So I took it in 1. And so I was acing, I found it easy. And it was amazing, guys, you know, after attack and so forth. I'll never forget the final. One guy goes, so what do you think of that final? I said, well, you know, he goes, really hard, right? I go, well, yeah. He goes, you think you got a C? And I looked at him like, so I said, yeah, I think I got a C. And I got an A. I mean, I aced the course. So, you know, again, you know, this whole thing of whatever, you know, so I'm like, forget it. And I'm not, I don't confront the biases because it's like it's a bias. Why should you? I mean, what are you going to do? It doesn't bother me. I just find it hilarious. You know, and my husband, like, was, you know, my boyfriend at the time was 2 years older than me, and, like, in these physics clubs, because I knew the stuff well, you know, it was early in the morning, I would, like, you know, rest my eyes, you know, and then if there's something interesting, I'd get, you know, open up my eyes and I'd write something down. And since I was a freshman and he was, like, a junior, and he was in charge of, you know, at Purdue, they have these dorm counselors, and he was the dorm counselor. Well, president, he was president of the dorm, wrong year. And these guys will always report to him, your girlfriend's sleeping all the time, you know, and all sorts of things. And he goes, aces. And I thought, I'm not sleepy. So it's just hilarious watching this, because they're all thinking I'm failing. They're telling me, so I just, you know, ignore it all. So, and then keep going. So I have 3 boys. They all look like my husband. They don't look like me. So as I was going through that, a lot of people thought I was a babysitter. Okay? And then the first time so when I first had to pick my children, maybe it was 1, I'm losing track what year, but we moved to something, I actually had to show my ID to pick the children, you know, they were going security. So I asked Joe, I said, well, did you? He goes, no, because they look like him. So I was like, you know, soccer field, you know, people adopt children, Asian. They go, oh, you know, your boy is, you know, blah, blah. I go, no, that's my boy. Or they're girls. Oh, we like your daughter. I'm like, no. That's my son. You don't look like me, and the girls are Korean, and the first, they're adopted by Caucasian. So there's all, you know, all these funny things. And then, I mean, another thing, we ended up having a party for all the veterinarians. My husband's a veterinarian. Oh, that's another thing. All my siblings have married, you know, engineers, technology. I married a guy who doesn't know anything technically. Anything that goes on in the house, the car, I get called. Versus if anything breaks, I don't go to my husband. You know, I mean, just the irony, you know, when we pick cars, I would say, you know, I analyzing, because in all this or whatever. He comes to the first time we bought a car together, and it was the last time I bought a car together. You know, the guy, I'm negotiating to figure it out, and the guy says, my husband's sitting there. He goes, well, do you have an opinion? He goes, yeah, I want the blue color. So very, very low reversal. So I just sit there like, why am I bringing this guy? Okay, so I just filed the car. So we had this party for veterinarians, and they didn't know me, right? So I get to the door, they answer the door, and they're just like talking past me, so it was obviously they thought I was a maid. And then my husband comes up, and they just ignore me, and they immediately go, oh, you know, that's, you know, whatever, shaking hands, and then they go, oh, have you met my wife? You know, the shock in their face, and you realize, yeah, they thought I was me. So I'm just telling you, you know, through life, you know, I didn't mean to get pregnant. I mean, it goes on, right? I've had 3 boys, right? So, you know, you stick out, which is actually good. You should be comfortable sticking out because, unfortunately, you're going to constantly get judged, whether it's right or wrong. And since you are in this industry, in some sense, you actually are comfortable in sticking out versus being in the crowd. You might not realize it, but you actually have made a choice. And I think that's very, very important. And you just should feel comfortable in it. I'm very goal-oriented and focused, which is probably why I can be very tenacious. I love organizing. I just love organizing. When I was 5 years old, my brother worked for Cisco, and I told him if he isn't going to show up, I'm going to use his name. And, of course, he didn't show up. He's my younger brother. So at 5 years old, my aunt was going on, whatever, and I decided to put on a show, a goodbye show for her. I was 5 years old. And so that means my brother was 2 years old, my other sister was 3 years old. And I ended up organizing, you know, and I you know, figured out their little skills, we put on a little show, and I used their skills. And my brother's skills, and that's why I threatened it, was he was into trucks, dump trucks. So I made him sing this song about dump trucks. Maybe I won't mention his name because I'll get so big. But yeah, I was organizing at 5, you know. So I just like organizing to the point my husband says there's something wrong with me. He thinks I'm, I go, that's because you don't like to organize. But anyhow, so I love that. I love building teams. I just enjoy when and women are very collaborative, very nurturing. So in some sense, I feel women are the best team builders. Women are the best managers. Because you don't just do the factual stuff and drive things home, but you also, not say all women like that, but, you know, the higher percentage, or higher, more natural. that you think more holistically about the team versus just the technical, deliveries and so forth. I mean, when I actually started primarily Tier 4 support at AT&T, and it was all guys, they were all, I was the only one that actually had children. And we had really long hours, and as they started having children, me being the planner, right, because you find out the pregnancy, 6 months in advance, I started, doing transition planning, and they're like, why do that? Well, you don't know, you might have your child might have health issues, colicky, you'll be really sick, so I want to make sure you're not stressed out. They just look at me like, you're planning 6 months in advance? I go, trust me, I've gone through this enough, and I have no idea. You don't know what's going to happen to your child, so I'm just going to help, because, peer support, you're getting that call, you can't say, hey, I have a baby, I'm tired, and so forth. So I wanted to make sure that the folks who, could take over if necessary and so forth. And they just were just shocked I was thinking like this. I thought, this is what I do. And I like inspiring teams and so forth. And it's great. It feels great when the team gets it and they're inspired and you go down a direction doing something that no one's ever done before. And it's just fun, especially at the end when it works. When it doesn't work, well, then it's a learning experience, right? I'm comfortable with being outspoken and opinionated. So I'm from a family of 6. I'm actually a third child. I'm not an oldest, which a lot of people are surprised about. And so you're like squeezed constantly. And so it's interesting, as I said, I'm team building, I like to mediate also and so forth. Being number 3 out of 6, you get exposed to the older ones, and you get exposed to the younger ones. And it's very interesting because the older ones actually are different from the younger ones, and I'm in the middle. That the younger ones complain to me about the older ones, and the older ones complain to me about the younger ones. And I feel like at times I go, well, this is why I can do, open source consortiums, right? Everyone's complaining, and sometimes I've just got to figure out how to do the team together. So again, because of where I am as a middle child, always trying to get everyone to work together and so forth. I really enjoy the industry, and maybe because I've always been doing bleeding edge. I get bored very quickly. And I've been a manager most of my career. So like I said, I've been in the company like 37, 38 years, but I've only been, recently, only 4 years have I been an individual contributor. So I was actually, within AT&T, I was at a 4th level, or I'm still at a 4th level. So it's close to like an ADT. I've had like up to 150 people working for me. And when my manager asked me to do this, I was not thrilled, but then I was really bored. So I said, oh, what the heck, I'll just try it. And everyone was shocked. Everyone thought I was going to retire, oh my God, I'm already, sports are out, all that stuff, right? So another set of, what's going on type of thing. It turns out I enjoyed so much, I actually tell them to forget it. I don't want to work in management because I didn't appreciate how much time it took to all the administrative stuff. I'm not telling you guys don't be managers. It's just I found after so many years of doing it and all the bureaucracy, I just actually found it very liberating. I also joke around, and it's not funny, so wait a minute, so when I became an individual contributor, I was the one that said I wanted to work on SD and virtualization. They told me only to spend 10% of my time on it, and look at where we are, and I thought, God, if I wasn't an individual contributor, we have been as far as we have been, I don't know, but I found it interesting, the correlation. And I'm actually enjoying it in a weird sense because it's actually, instead of hurting the company, you're hurting the whole industry, which is a different view. And as you can tell, I mean, I actually have humor. I don't take myself serious, and even as people, and I always feel people are more. There's very good people, and when they come across insulting me, and I try to get beyond the words and so forth, and get to the facts and so forth. And as I start to get to know them more, I start asking questions, I actually have found that most of the time it's a style, there's a word they use, not appreciate how offensive. And then I just, and once I realize how, quote, good they really are, then I realize, okay, I just have to get over the style, get used to the style. And maybe it's because I've always been, I'm a middle child, and I just, I don't know. I guess I don't want to go to battle on things like that. So, have I killed my time already? Okay. So this is background. So I want to go through quickly about AT&T's whole Domain 2.0. That's what we sort of call it. Our goal is to have 75% of our network on an SD-enabled cloud in by 2020. So the goal is to have it in 4 key principles: open, which I think is obvious, open APIs, whether they're standards, open source, simple. The key thing is once you get there, it should be simpler. The problem is getting there may not be simple. Scalable and secure. There are 3 pillars: NFV, network function virtualization, Ecom, which is really our automated system of doing instantiation life cycle of the platform as well as virtual functions for an environment, and also SCN and Ecom. So this is where you have controllers actually helping you instantiate services and stuff like that. And I'll just show you some of that. And so as I was getting into this, I only get involved in industry things if things are very basic, and I feel it really will help us as a corporation with an ACP. And also I find that when the industry is very nascent, a lot of ideas, a lot of innovation, a lot of people start talking about different things. So I got involved in the industry in this space because I wanted to learn from others. And I learned a lot. So just to let you know how very interesting this whole thing started. So when I got asked to get involved in this SCIG and FDIC, creating this forum, and we decided to put it in the SC, I was talking to all these carriers, and they were like doing all these talks on virtualization, or like some of them like over a year or 2. I was like shocked. We were doing nothing, zero. So I was like, oh my God. And so I ended up pulling people back within AT&T. Nobody worked for me, right? I mean, individual contributors. And just saying, we got to do some certain talks. So we started pulling people together and so forth. None of this was really, quote, sanctioned and some stuff. I've never done real sanctions any half the time. So, I just started pulling people together. And I actually joked around that I think the only reason people were willing to have people work with me is because they were worried that I would eventually come back as an AVP and I'd be their manager, so they figured they better not piss me off. So it's really quite interesting. I was like, wow, people are actually willing to get people to me to help me do stuff on this spare time, and then they're complaining, no, we really have real work to do. I say, no, but let's just do this little thing. And then I'm like, why are they still doing this thing, buzz off market? And then I realized, well, they're pretty nervous and then come back. So I said, good, So as we were doing the POCs and so forth, then we had this Domain 2 committee and so forth, and then I got stuck on a committee because I'm an individual contributor now, and you get volunteer for all these ridiculous committees. And so, I shouldn't say ridiculous, there's actually a good committee, because one of the goals of Domain 2 was like, we want to do something very bold and innovative, and really want to do something very transformative. This is from Donovan's view. And so I got on this committee, and people were talking about layer 0, layer 3, convergence, blah, 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 that kind of stuff. And I just kept sitting there like, this is not very innovative and bold. So then I actually, said, look, guys, here, how about this? So I started just, going through a talk about SDN and virtualization. The whole team goes, wow, this is different. And they all rallied around it. And to be fair, I would say Blackburn was the one who ran the gauntlet of officers and trying to explain what this was and so forth. And then Donovan, it was a perfect storm. Donovan wanting to do something. Donovan reports to Randall Stevenson. I forgot what level he was at that time, but he's always been an officer. Donovan actually, was the perfect storm. Donovan was looking for something fundamentally earth-shattering, and then, thus things exposed to him that he actually sold it to Randall, who's our CEO, and then it came tough down. So one of the value propositions is, so let's talk about this. So before we have all these different P&Ls, I just want to make sure I can talk for hours actually. Okay. Once you have P&L, quote the old way, physical network functions. This is when you have your network function integrated with that hardware, and then hardware is going to be specific. Some of it might be cost, but people are still wrapping it to be very specific. So think about it. If I have 10 functions, and I have, and on 10 different hardware platforms, if I want to do automation, right, to reduce my operational costs and things like that, I have to automate 10 times. I mean, there might be certain things you do common, but I literally have to automate 10 times, And especially, well, okay, maybe I have to automate 5 times because there's 5 different companies, vendors. That's a lot. And what happens is you can't automate everything on day one. And then what happens is you do priorities, you know, revenues, whatever, and so some of the smaller ones won't get automated completely. If you go to a cost environment, common off-the-shelf environment, technically you only have to automate one. And fully automate, because now you don't have to do 5 or 10 parallel full automation. You really only have to do 1 from a platform point of view. And then the only part that you have to finish automating, not to trivialize it, is the application part that's specific. So that actually is pretty critical. So part of this is being able to fully automate more effectively by going on cost. And the other is cycle time. That's actually the part I've always focused on, was improving cycle time of instantiating new services, cycle time of instantiating new infrastructures. And why is that? Think about it. When I'm in the P&F state, I want to bring up a new service. But I want to put it in 5 markets or 10 markets. That means I have to get space, cooling, and air, electricity for 10 different locations for that hardware. So now that cost of trying to experiment on something new has gone up, and so then the risk, in some sense, goes up, or the cost of risk goes up. If I'm on a virtual platform, I can now have all the cost environments in place, and now I don't have to worry about space, you know, cooling and so forth, because it's already there. I just have to worry about the cost related to the actual unit. And if it fails for whatever reason, I can turn it down, and that's possible to reuse it. So these are really the real questions of why this is important for us. Just imagine that this is actually going to be very hard. Oh, sorry about that. The real problem is trying to get there, which is, you know, the end state. Okay.
Trying to get the phone ready because they say they can't hear you very well.
Oh, you know, this keeps going in and out.
I noticed that too.
So just stand in front of this.
That would be great. Okay. Except nothing's showing.
Oh, this because this came back.
Oh.
All right.
Oh, do I take this away? You can keep it.
Oops.
Okay, I only have the microphone.
I only have 20 minutes. Okay, so. So let's keep going. So the goal of this whole thing is AT&T is focusing on trying to cloudify anywhere AT&T has a presence. All right, so that's what this is supposed to show. We have all the way maybe even to a hub. Now, we don't have services that require that yet, but we're trying to make sure technology-wise that it's potential, so that when a new service that someone imagines now needs requirements like very, very low latency, which forces the concept of a high distributed cloud, that we at least have the technology in place. But the goal is to have this AT&T integrated cloud. You know, this just shows, you know, here you have multiple clouds, you know, the data center cloud, the cloud service provider cloud, the network cloud. The goal is to merge it, have a common environment that's automated, and then as the services get evolved that require more distribution, this year I think our target is like 69 sites, but as the industry evolves, as new services get created, we have to expand to hundreds or thousands, we will. And the goal is to have it on this common platform. Okay, so let's talk about open source. So this is a slide that shows the lifespan of an S&P 500 company. And if you see, in 1960, the average lifespan was over 62 years, which is a long time. And it's the average, right? So of course you have higher and lower. But if you look at the trend, it's dropping. And if you look at the projection of, you know, 2025, it's less than 15 years. So my comment is, why do you want open? Because if you want the company to be around for a long time, can you afford to go on proprietary, vendor specific? If, you know, that
company that supports that proprietary vendor-specific falls off or gets merged and then the thing gets canceled. And so my view is if this is really the trend, we, at least from a carrier point of view, who want to be around longer than 15 years, really can't afford to stay on a vendor-specific. Because, you know, the vendor will, right? And we've seen a lot of churn in this industry. So this isn't, for this industry, this should not be a shocker because we've experienced it. So what is AT&T Domain 2.0? So this shows at a high level our structure. We call it the golden thread slide of how we're organizing, how we're budgeting, and how we're organizing and just operating. And the high level, the first line is green for money. So these are all our businesses, and you can just sort of see the factions. We try to do these color things. And then the AT&T Integrated Cloud is this middle area, which is basically blue is software, orange is hardware. And so we actually, I mean, I won't go through all that because we're running out of time, but we're truly organizing, developing, in some sense, architecting around these frameworks. So the open source organizations that we are actually focused on. So I took our golden thread slide and I overlaid it with open source concerns that we are focused on, that we feel we have to shape, which is different from listing all the open source pieces we use. So just remember, so that's, it's really more of what we should pay attention to, what we might need to participate on more. And then we overlaid it using our golden slide, a golden thread structure. And so this is just the AIC part, the AT&T Integrated Cloud piece. So again, blue is software, green is hardware. And there's really just four, if like we really don't have enough resource for a lot of things, there are four organizations we are very focused on that we need to really shape more. One is OPNFV, which I'm the president of. And the goal of OPNFV is actually to pull together all the stuff that we're trying to use in an open organization, a collaborative community, and to try to make it work. Because right now you've got all the vendors trying to make stuff work, you've got the carriers each trying to make it all work, and we're all repeating stuff. So the goal is to try to get things that we're all doing in common, do it in a public forum, or fix it in a public forum, or automate it in a public forum, whatever, together, so that we can free ourselves up to get back to our core competencies. What's AT&T's core competency? It should not be this. It should go back to creating new services that, of course, our customers, you know, care about, will pay. For the network vendors, get back to the, you know, network applications and so forth, which is your core competency, and then the platform people can get back to being on platform. But because we started doing this whole virtualization SDN, it sort of threw up everything up in the air, and now we're all getting involved in the platform piece, all of us. And we're not, in some sense, that means there's less resources being expended on our core competency. And so that was the value of OpenFA. The other two pieces that are foundational for us is OpenStack, because of the orchestration. And in some sense, OpenStack is trying to also be a service orchestrator and cloud orchestrator, as well as a cloud orchestrator, even though there's other movement afoot trying to do other stuff. But we can see that. Open Daylight, we find it a good programmable platform, very, very, well, it's model-driven. For controlling devices or widgets, whether that widget is network, whether that's widgets are layer 7 applications, or whether that's widgets like IoT. So it's beyond just how SDN started. It's really a platform, and so we actually see that as actually foundational for us. And finally, on the hardware side, we actually, as we're trying to do open, more COTS, more white box, more leaf spine, and this just shows the different areas that you can get into that. We see the Open Compute Project as an area where we can actually then innovate in the hardware from the hardware related to some of these open concepts there. Okay? Is this, I mean, are people following this? I don't know what everyone's background is. Yeah? Okay. So we probably have, how many minutes? 10. 10, okay. I don't know how many slides are left. Okay, so just so very quickly, how we look at, how AT&T looks at controllers versus orchestrators, because I know the industry blurs it together, and we keep trying to separate it out. So you have, you know, physical functions, and you notice I put network in lighter color, because what we found is it doesn't matter what layer you're talking about. You have physical functions, and the key thing is you have these controllers that are instantiating, manipulating life cycles of that function. So that's in the green. These colors actually mean stuff because it sort of permeates through certain architecture slides. And then when you virtualize that function, the orange box is a container. A VM container, not the other container, but yeah. So this NFEI, which is what the SE people use terminology-wise. So you have a cloud orchestrator that goes with that. And our comment is we want best in breed of both, because we actually feel part of the industry is better on the cloud orchestrator, part of the industry is better on the controller side. And we want to be able to pick and choose. Because we found vendors were merging the two, and we were saying, okay, how about if I just want your controller, and I want someone else orchestrator, can I do that? And they had intermixed everything, it couldn't happen. So this is why we use this picture. We really see it. And then in the end, you have a service orchestrator. So once you start doing virtualization, and then you start getting this concept of service training, things like that, people trying to tie together a lot of services, then the concept of an orchestrator becomes important. Okay. This just happens to show our Ecom architecture, I would say functional blocks, not quite an architecture. And in there you have a service design and creation block, you have this operation management function, and you have an active and available inventory, and then you have the controller. And we just show that there's two different types of controllers. So, so think of it this way as the whole system. You have an observed state of a function, whatever that function is. And then the issue is that observed state efficient? So then you might have concepts like preferred states. And what is the concept of preferred states that you optimize on? Cost, SLAs, performance, reliability, security, right? And as you have these four, let's say, different preferred states, you now need something that has to reconcile and compromise to figure out what the targeted state is, because it's usually complex. You now need some sort of analysis as well, what should the target state be, if these are the four preferred states. And once you have the target state, right, then you look at basically, is my observed state meeting my target state? And if the answer is yes, you don't do anything. If the answer is no, then you actually have to go and make changes. And this controlled loop of observe, preferred, target, do something, don't do something, happens constantly because, unfortunately, the observed state keeps changing. But this is sort of the heart of what we are doing with an AT&T. And other companies are also starting to do that. This just shows me there's a lot of different adapters. In fact, the joke is becoming we love every adapter that's out there that's open source and even closed. And unfortunately, or good or bad, AT&T actually is in the middle of all of them. But what this tries to show is we have a global controller, and we are basing that on Open Daylight. We have an application controller, on the right, which is layer 4 to 7, and that we're basing on Open Daylight. And then we have a lot of local controllers that are more intimately tied to the network, the specific network designs that's happening at these other areas. So for optic, we might have a controller, and it might be ONUS or ODL based, access sensing ONUS and ODL based, fabric switch ONUS and ODL based, and even local controllers, which is Open Contrail, might also be ODL based too. So we have a lot of controllers now all trying to vie for similar things, but the industry is still evolving and so forth, so we can sort of see. So we came up with a framework to show this federation of controllers and how they fit in, because we knew, well, basically, is there going to be one controller, one open source controller, and it's not clear to us. It's not clear to us. So that's the reason why we came up with this, recognizing it. The point of this slide is when you start getting to this whole Ecom structure, and the industry is all doing their version of Ecom, the relationship of a controller to a cloud orchestrator, to a service orchestrator, and who hands off to what and so forth, can be done a lot of different ways, and they will all work. So because the industry has not really laid this out, AT&T, because we're not waiting, especially with our targets, right? We have 5% has to be done by the end of the year. We're developing our Ecom now. We're rolling it out. In fact, most of it should be out there by the end of next year. And we're making choices. So AT&T has, this is AT&T's version, and it's definitely an AT&T version. But every industry is doing it. You got HP has their version. You have, some carriers that are building their version. And so now the industries are very segmented, or we're just all over the place, which is not good. But those are the challenges. Those are the challenges and why OPNFB exists. The goal is for OPNFB is to basically try to see if we can get the industry together to work on things that should be in common as everyone goes off and does their thing. Because I believe that, in fact, I joke around that if we stay divided, we will be conquered. And so that we really need to work together and hopefully go faster. This just talks about the relationship with the SC-NFB organization. They're to rally all the standards people, and then OPNFB is to rally all the open source, and the goal is to try to keep these two linked together. No, this just goes more than OPNFB. So I don't want to belabor a lot of this stuff. So let me just tell you also, so when I first started in AT&T, I got into networking because I was tired of programming, and I was only out of school. I just found it boring. And so when I interviewed, in Bell Labs at the time, you interview 4 organizations. So 3 were software development organization, and 1 was this thing called networking, which is actually very nascent. That's just how old I am. And I was like, you didn't have this in class. Nothing. You didn't have anything about motors. No, there was no class on it. I guess maybe you went for math. No, I didn't think there was a class. So I was like, oh, what's this? You know, and so as they're telling me stuff, I was like, oh, maybe I'll do this. I have no background in it, and I'm like, I want to try this. I don't want to do programming. I want to try this. And so as IBM was starting SNA SDLC, and I actually ended up getting SNA SDLC into AT&T. Well, to go through where I am. I was given the task, AT&T at the time was building everything. And then you had companies like IBM. And there was always this tension of do we buy or build? And so we had folks in Indian Hill that were building something similar to SNA, but not even close from it if you really look at the feature. And then you had IBM. So I was given the task to decide, do we use the internal one or do we use the external one? So I, being fresh out of college, going, oh, yeah, I'll do the comparison. And when you compared all our, so I went to what did we need feature-wise. And when I did the comparison of the two, it was so obvious you go IBM. So we got on this call, and the 4th level, that was my level, was on the call, and I'm reviewing, going through whatever. And the guy sort of says, what idiot is making this recommendation? So I was like, okay, so I gave my full name and said, I'm making this recommendation. Right, I've only been out of school for 1 year. And I just went through the facts. I just stay factual. I mean, people can always decide for other reasons. I just want to make sure you do it with open eyes with the facts. And then it can be other reasons, and that's life, fine. So I went through all the feature sets. I did the comparisons, and all his side was no, 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 no. So I said, okay, we're trying to, manage a data center, so if you say you're going to give us in whatever the date was, fine, then we'll go internal. He's like, and he made kind of like, when did IBM do all this stuff? I said, I have no idea when you reviewed it. I just reviewed it. And so the good thing about my management, which shocks me, is the guy couldn't respond, and my management supported me. I was only out of school, in fact, for a year. So, and then when we did this, I got calls from all the RBOCs, they weren't called RBOCs back then, going, how the hell did you get SNA? We've been trying to get it in, and the Bell Labs would say, no, you're going to use internal stuff. I said, I don't know, I just went to the West, and it happened. But once I started getting more and more involved in IBM, I started having opinions of what I didn't like. So IBM had users groups. And so I started going to users groups. And there probably weren't that many women then, but like I said, I've always stuck out, so who cares? And I would just, I'm very comfortable with people saying you're wrong, and then we have the discussion. So even back then, I started getting very engaged in these user groups, and I basically started giving my opinion. And some of it was wrong, some of it was right, and I had, and wow. And so it's interesting. So it's just interesting. And so my sort of end this is, you should feel comfortable being a loner because you picked your degree, which sort of you got you into it. And just so you know, you're not as loner as I was because I'm like looking at the room. And we didn't have all these women, technical stuff because we didn't have enough women. So I actually laugh. When I go to these conferences and they all have these women breakfasts, and I just laugh because I say, it's taken 30 years to get to this point, but okay. And it was funny. I was in an OpenStack something in Philly, and they were asking like a summary of stuff, and they wanted improvement. So one guy raised his hand And he goes, we should have more diversity. And so I was thinking OpenStack diversity, right? You know, OpenStack from a technical. And he's like, okay, maybe, you know, multi-site, you know, and stuff like that. But then they would say stuff that didn't make sense. So I totally raised my hand. I go, what do you mean by diversity? He goes, more women. I go, what? I go, yeah, a bunch of guys. So so don't worry about it. You just need to participate. And when you feel strong about something, say it. Sometimes you're right, sometimes you're wrong, and of course, you know, guys are very brutally honest about if they think you're full of it. But so what? I mean, people are constantly judging you anyhow. So but listen to the comments, no matter how nice you might come across, and really try to be very objective about it, because there's usually some sort of truth in it. But don't let that intimidate you for the next time, because, I mean, come on, you know? Not everyone's perfect, not everyone's right. You think the guys are always right, then come on. They just speak up more, right? So why should you, I mean, hey, what the heck? And like I said, you picked an industry, you picked a field where you're already out of your element, a group of people that's always a bunch of men in a room, in the class. I mean, I've been in engineering classes where they have like 100 people, and like, I'm the only girl, and they would come up to me and say, you realize you're the only girl? I'm like, God. You know, it's like, you know, you got to tell me that. So, I mean, so that's life. And just, you know, and then, you know, when you need advice or whatever, and, you know, go to your fellow women, because you obviously have a lot. Okay?
I would like to, I just would like to take a few minutes to open it up for a couple of questions, and I want to kick it off with one that I'm really curious. So you are a distinguished architect at AT&T. You're at a very high level. You've been in various management positions to a very high level. Do you see a glass ceiling at AT&T? Do you see where you're going after this? Do you see an issue after you reach to a certain point?
Ah, that's a dangerous question. Do you see a glass ceiling at AT&T? So, of course, AT&T as a corporation would say, no, there is no glass ceiling. So what happens, and it happens in a lot of corporations, the people who decide promotion and rankings, a lot of times are men. And as a woman, you approach things differently. I mean, I definitely approach things differently from most of the guys I work with. I don't know what to tell you. Yeah. It doesn't intimidate me. I just don't, it doesn't worry me. And I guess I've been around, for me personally, I've always judged happiness on how much I've influenced in pushing some sort of technology idea or service versus the ranking. In fact, even versus the money, because, you know, like I probably should, you know, make more money. And maybe it's because I decided if I go after certain things that are very subjective, sort of like this piano experience I had when I was in high school, or whatever grade I was in. I got to a point I just said, the hell with it. I'm going to make sure I'm happy. I'm going to make sure I'm still effective. And then whether you get the promotion or whatever and so forth, especially, you know, if you might feel like, you know, whatever, because they're, you know, they think a certain way. They're looking for this type of mode, and you don't fit it. And it can happen to guys, right? Very easily, you know, there's certain modes and so forth. It's not worth it having it eat away at you. I mean, you can, but it's not worth it. But if it does eat away, you always have a choice. You leave and look for another environment that's, you know, more supportive of you, or you stay, and you just, you know, and you find your happiness. And on me, just to let you know, I've always tried to be quitting AT&T for the last 37 years. I've been trying to get out of New Jersey for the last 37 years. I always say I'm temporarily there. And my husband's a veterinarian. You don't just go, you know, buy, sell practices. So I'm like, okay, now what do I do if I'm not happy? And I always look for the fundamentals of what really makes me happy versus maybe and maybe I compromise them, versus going after things that I think might make me happy, but if it gets so judgmental in this stuff, it's like, is it worth it? And some women, it's worth it. For me, it really isn't worth it. I mean, I just look at what's going on now, so I've been I mean, who would have thought, you know, this whole industry, the ISG, NFB, I mean, 5 of us, you know, come in with this idea, let's just get everyone together and talk, and then you just look at what happened, and then AT&T, I mean, it's a shock. This is a shock. And then I'm president of this OPNFE, which is like, oh God, this is amazing. Trying to rally everybody around. But again, like I said, you got to decide what makes you happy. And if you want to become a CEO and things like that, and you don't find the environment helping you in that part, you definitely should leave, you know. You just got to figure out what your happiness is. And then determines, even when you're a mother, you definitely compromise things, and you just got to be satisfied that's just life. You know, I always, you know, tell my husband, you know, if we lived in California and had no children, my God, well, it would have been so different from my career point of view. But, you know, it's choice, so fine. I could, you know, whatever, complain. I do complain every once in a while. Why are we still integrated? You're holding me back, you know. But, you know, it's a choice, you know. I want to be married, stay married, you know. You know, he doesn't want to move, and he doesn't like change, which is hilarious since he married me. He doesn't like to stick out, and he doesn't like change. He actually dates me and marries me at a time when no one did this. We were a mixed marriage, right? But, you know, for whatever reason. So you just have to, you don't want to be bitter. You don't want to be bitter, you know, because it will wear you down from your health and everything. You really just have to take what's going on, and you do have a choice. Do you quit to find the better environment that you want, or do you make, you know, create, you know, what you like the most, you know, and get happiness. And maybe some of that's adjusting what you want to do because it's just what you inherited, right? Like I said, my kids, my goal was not to have 3 kids, let alone boys. I mean, but, you know, and so I actually think it's healthy in the end. So, and, you know, if you have, you know, like I said, you know, friends, sisters, you know, whatever, all my sisters, we all just complain to each other about stuff. And, you know, find that support structure. And a lot of times it may not be the husband, that's for sure. My husband doesn't understand this stuff. Yeah.
Where do you see the Docker or the container technology 5 to 10 years from now? Like, do you see it replacing the VM completely?
So from a high-level point of view, if you look at the fundamentals of VM, there's a high overhead. In fact, since I've been in networking for so many decades, you know, you have tunnels over tunnels over tunnels. If you have this little data, you have all these headers. Well, that's what the VMs are. It's operating system under operating system, right? So you have this huge overhead of the operating system. So the value proposition of container is really to, you know, be able to, quote, do these concepts of VMs, but not with all this overhead on the operating system. So there's things, so the industry is trying to, you know, get to the best of all worlds. Low overhead, fast installation, be able to do higher density, but to actually do what VMs do as long as you're on a type of operating system. See, if you want to do the pure thing of like I want a Microsoft operating system and a Linux and so forth, then you really have no choice. You have to go down the path. But the NFV world is new. We all said, you know, go on Linux. So we actually have a chance of migrating to containers because no one's doing Microsoft operating systems on this side, right? Or at least I hope not. So there's things moving afoot. I mean, I know Intel announced this thing called Linux Clear Container. Linux, yeah. In fact, I forget who told me about that. But anyhow, so that has a chance. So I think there's opportunity. So I hope so, because this overhead is actually pretty expensive.
Unfortunately, we are out of time. I'm so sorry. Do you have a couple of minutes afterwards?
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe you can come and ask. I just want to thank again Margaret for coming. What a great story. I think there's a lot of great takeaways to, you know, we're here, we're sticking out, we might as well enjoy it and do the best we can and pursue. I just want to quickly remind everyone that I'll send out a survey at the end of the day. Please do respond. It takes just a few minutes. Even if you just want to say a word, that's fine. I do care about it. And next month, we're going to have Rong Pen, who's a distinguished engineer in the Insieme team, to talk about some of the new data center technology that she's been working on. But again, thank you, Margaret.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Thank you very much.